All right, welcome to the Ourlads Gambling Show. I'm your host, Ryan McKee, and I am joined today by the hosts of the College Experience on the Sports Gambling Podcast Network, a long-time DGen gambler. Give it up for Pick Dundee, a.k.a. Colby Dant. How's it going, my man?
Oh, it's going great. I appreciate you, letting me come on this show, and it's going good because the college football season is getting closer and closer. As on our podcast, the College Football Experience, we're breaking down all 134 teams. So every day, I just got back from Mountain West Media Days in Vegas, talking to coaches. It gets you super excited, super pumped up, and it's tough when you look and you're like, man, we still have like over 30 days. So, but I'm excited.
Yeah, it's crazy that you're actually like a vetted member of the media now. You're not just a degenerate talking on a podcast that, other degenerates are listening to. You're a media member now. You're going to actual media events.
Yeah, they made a mistake and let me in. Yeah, I think that was Mike Leach that kind of opened that door for us. And then now we get credentialed, and they make the mistake. I was at Mountain West Media Day, and I feel like most people are breaking down the offense and the defense, which I do to some extent. But I also was asking strange questions like who would win in the head coaching Royal Rumble. So yeah, I don't know how they let me in, but I'm there.
Yeah. Okay. I got to ask you now that, now that the season's coming up and it's, before we get into your college football futures, your favorite picks, are you all caught up on what teams are in what conferences? Can you name the conferences? Do you feel pretty confident about that? How are you with this, and the NIL, all the guys moving around?
Yeah, no, I am, just because I eat, breathe and live this stuff, but I can understand the lay fan might be, I can't even justify, as someone that loves college football very passionately, I can't justify Stanford and Cal in the ACC. It's just one of those ones weird where you're like, what? Like, if you had told me that 20 years ago, I just don't think I would have guessed. A lot of other crazy things would happen before that, but it's radical change is happening with the sport. But I'll be honest, I think it's good for the sport, and I think doing my exercise for breaking down every single team in college football, which is 134 this year. I find this year to be the most refreshing and interesting and exciting from a preseason point of view, as compared to years previously.
Yeah, I gotta say, I know that college football traditionalists hate it with all the movement. But for me, as more of a casual fan, I guess you could say, I find it very interesting. All the movement, all the player movement, trying to figure out who's where. And I like that the NIL is there and the transfer portal. It seems to be keeping players in college football longer, potentially. I feel like if you can make some money, you're more likely to stick around, and it's just fun to get to know these guys a little longer in college football than we did before.
100%. And I would also say an element that probably, if you're not paying attention to college football nonstop and really know the sport, I consider myself a traditionalist, but so I'm like anti, some of these changes. Like, I think I wish the Pac-12 was still there, but
yeah.
But I think this is still very healthy for the sport. Not necessarily the realignment, but NIL. For years, there was just a select few of schools that were cheating. And like a perfect example is Missouri. Had we had the 12-team playoff that we're going to have this year, last year, Missouri would have made the playoffs, and Missouri was able to keep their top in-state talent, Luther Burden, who will be in the NFL in just a short amount of time, home at Missouri through their NIL collective, when years previously he would have taken money under the table, probably at LSU or Alabama or something.
Right.
It's better for the sport to me. And we've seen it since NILs came out. To me, you've seen a lot more diversity within the sport.
Yeah, I think that's really exciting. All right, well, let's get into betting. This is all about college futures, this episode. So where do we start? Where should we start? Do you have like a conference you want to start with, or you just want to start going through your list? How do you want to do it?
Yeah, we could go conference by conference. Obviously, the SEC is jumping to a 16-team conference. They're still got the 8 conference game schedule, but they add Oklahoma and Texas, which are 2 very historic college football programs.
Yeah, a fun rivalry to add.
Yes, the Red River Shootout, and also we're getting the Texas A&M rivalry back, which I think is great. And this one, I'm not actually mad at the realignment in a way, because I feel like they kind of fit the footprint of the SEC. This is one where I'm fascinated. So here's the one flaw, and I think this is a great for gamblers, is these conferences are gigantic now. When they were spinning this 12-team playoff idea a few years back, so we finally agreed to this 12-team playoff, but this was built on the old version of college football, say 5-6 years ago, right? Where you have a lot more smaller conferences, 10, 12 conferences. And now you have a situation where you have these gigantic conferences. So it makes it very interesting because auto bids are on the line. The team that wins the SEC, the ACC, the Big 10, and the Big 12 are automatically in, and also the highest ranking group of 5. So it makes it super interesting because they didn't really think this through that well, because to me, it's about schedules more than it's about the best teams. Because which years past, I don't think that was the case. I think years past, you look at the best teams. This is really about what schedule, I think, because with like, take the Big 10 with 18 teams. Certain teams have great schedules. Certain teams have just tremendously hard schedules. And sometimes it's the better football teams with the really hard schedules. So with the SEC, my exercise was like, sure, Georgia looks like they're probably the best team in the SEC, maybe the best team in the country. But I also think their schedule is a little bit harder. I think there's actually a legit chance, because Georgia plays at Alabama early in September. They play at Texas in October. And they get Tennessee in November, which, I mean, they've had Tennessee's number, but there's a chance. And that's another thing. The conferences haven't released their tiebreakers yet, which is very fascinating. I don't know how they're going to do that, because I think all these conferences realize they might have a problem, which is kind of why I think they'll expand the 12-team playoff super fast. But my point is with all of this is that I think you're looking for the best schedule, not necessarily the best team. And that is why I like futures on the LSU Tigers and the Texas A&M Aggies.
Okay, because they have 2 of the easiest schedules right now.
Well, they're good teams. Yeah, they're good teams. And I think if you look at the schedule, so like LSU's plus 1,000 right now, 10-1 to win the conference. They lose their Heisman Trophy candidate to the NFL, but they bring in or the backup, Garrett Nussmeier, the son of Doug Nussmeier. He's really good. We saw them play the bowl game. They won the bowl game, and I think they're not going to miss a beat there. And I think they've fixed some of their defensive problems from a season ago. And if you look at the schedule, I think what you're really trying to do when it comes to college sports, and I would even say college basketball or college football, you hit the road is when you normally lose. I don't think it's ironic that, most national champions over the past, decade or 2 decades, you look at their schedules, the teams that wins the national championships normally play the minimum amount of road games. That's because college sports is crazy, especially college football environments. And you look at a team like LSU,
especially SEC with those home field advantages, insane.
100%. And you look at LSU's schedule, just the fact they're in the SEC, by the way, I think 9-3 will probably get you in the playoffs. Now, I do think there'll probably be a 9-3 team that gets shafted, but I think LSU's got enough clout. There's still subjectivity, which, I hate about this, is you have the 4 auto bids or 5 auto bids with the group of 5, and the rest, the other 7 spots are all subjective. It's based on these voters, and they're going to favor the SEC. So even if they don't win the conference, it's enticing to even look at LSU to potentially make the 12-team playoff this year. But you look at the schedule, to me, your road spots are at. Now, you do have a neutral site against USC in the opener in Vegas. I still think LSU is favored to win that game. and that they're probably come out victorious. It is a little dangerous with Lincoln Riley, but besides that, they're at South Carolina, at Arkansas, at Texas A&M, and at Florida. Well, A&M is the only team that had a winning record a season ago on their road schedule. And even though I've kind of expect them to lose that game at A&M because they've historically lost there, one loss on the road is going to get you to the SEC championship, in my opinion. If you take care of business at home, I think that's what you're looking for. Now, of course, they do play the Texas Longhorns, the final game of the season. It's funny. I've ran through and I've actually picked every game of the whole entire season on my my spreadsheets for my show, and I have Texas A&M actually beating Texas and putting the playoff committee in an interesting spot, because that might be a playoff game the final week of the season. And I actually think also Texas A&M to not make the playoff could be enticing because of that matchup. But when you look at I'm sorry, I'm getting sidetracked.
You have Texas A&M winning, but then not making the playoff.
Well, it could be. That's what I'm saying. Like, you really got to pay attention to the politics here. But LSU, to me, and Texas A&M have two of the easier schedules in this conference. I think both really could end up playing for the championship. I would love to know the tiebreaker. They have yet to release the tiebreaker scenario in this stuff. I don't know if they're going to go with, we saw the Mountain West last season do a tiebreaker based on, I think it was non-con record opponents. It could be a coin flip. I don't know, but I can tell you this. When I look at Texas's schedule, when I look at Georgia's schedule, rosters that we know are better than probably LSU and Texas A&M's, I think there's more landmines in their schedules. So I think there's great value on taking LSU and taking Texas A&M and Mike Elko's first year. Those are two that I really like in the SEC. Another one that's intriguing to me is Tennessee.
Oh, okay. So I'm just kind of looking at DraftKings right now. College football playoff to make the playoffs. Texas A&M is plus 220 and LSU is plus 120. You like both of those bets?
I do, but I also think this is where, this is going to be the new thing of gambling on college football is you have to basically try to decide, is it better to them to win the SEC championship? If your value is better to win the SEC championship, which is an auto bid to the playoff, then maybe it makes more sense to bet them to win that, to win the SEC. But like LSU's, like I said, 10-1 to win the conference. I believe A&M is 14-1.
14-1. Yeah, I was just going to say.
And plus 225 to make the playoff. Now, if you just take the plus 225, you might be in a very good spot, but you're going to be counting on the committee if they don't make the SEC championship.
Right.
That's where it gets a little tricky. It's like you're going to have multiple 9-3 teams, and you're kind of just blind faith. But I think they can go 10-2 with this roster. I had a chance to sit down with a former A&M player on my show, and we were breaking down the roster. And I really think with Connor Wegman, who I think is an NFL quarterback, the pass protection will be a lot better this year. And I think just in general, Mike Elko is just a coach with a plan compared to Jimbo Fisher. I think, and the way that schedule aligns with their road spots as well, they got to beat Notre Dame in the opener, but I think they can get Texas the final game of the season. I'm so excited to watch that game. I think both are very good, smart bets. And like I said, I also think the Tennessee Volunteers one is very intriguing too, because to me, the easier schedules in this conference are A&M, LSU, Missouri, and Tennessee. And maybe you throw Ole Miss in there too. So those five are just much easier than Alabama's, Georgia's, and Texas' schedules this season. So, and Oklahoma I'll throw in there. So I think that's your angle. I also like the win total over. If you just want to keep it basic, I like A&M on their win total over. So, you can play this, you can, slice this thing many ways. It's going to be fascinating because I'm new to this too. I'm new to this 12 team playoff as far as, do you want to place a wager on the committee? Which, like I said, I kind of like just taking the win total to cover yourself and then taking
so you got Texas A&M at 8.5 wins. You like the over there?
I do. I actually think like worst case scenario 8-4, right? And so yes, you wouldn't hit on that, but I just think they're in a good spot. They'd have to have their quarterback get injured or something. I think they're in a very good spot. I think Mike Elko is a coach that always has a plan, and I really like the talent that he walked into there in College Station. So I like the over there. I believe LSU's at 9 or 9.5. Shop around. I think
9.
there's some 9s
I'm seeing
out
it
there.
At 9 right now. Yeah.
Love the over there. They host Alabama. Remember Brian Kelly beat Alabama with Nick Saban 2 years ago. You love it when it's in Baton Rouge. This year it's in Baton Rouge. So I think that one is a pretty darn good play. I think the floor is 9-3, so you'll even get a push to me if all goes wrong. Mm-hmm. And those two make a lot of sense. And then the Tennessee play, I think the schedule's just nice. The Tennessee one's a little bit more of a gamble because we haven't seen their star quarterback play, but just one game. But I think he's really good, and I think they'll be able to gel in that with that schedule. I think the defense will be a little bit better this year too.
Quite a bit of juice on Tennessee's over 8.5 is at -170 on DraftKings.
That's why you might just want to take the playoff.
Like it. Yeah.
That's what I mean is like each one, it's very like I can't emphasize this enough. It's so much different than college football a year ago because you're basically deciding between 3 wagers. You're like, hey, well, if they go 9-3, can they make the playoffs? If they go 10-2, they will make the playoffs. So do you want to take the gamble on them to make the playoffs? Do you want to take the gamble on them to win the SEC, make an appearance in the SEC championship game? My only hesitation with that is not knowing the tiebreakers. I don't know when they're going to release this stuff. I feel like they should have already released it. But
if we're betting on it, you would hope that we would already know what the tiebreakers are going to be here.
And I honestly, I think they realized probably the same thing that I'm realizing as I'm previewing all these conferences and teams, that you're just sitting there like, whoa, like there's a chance with this big of conferences that you're not going to get the best 2 teams playing one another. And I think that they might realize that might be a problem moving forward, which, like I said, imagine Texas gets left out. Imagine Texas goes 9-3 and A&M goes 9-3 or something, but A&M beats them on the final week of the season. You're not going to be able to put Texas in, even though they played a way harder schedule than A&M.
Yeah.
Before they were excluding the mid-major and their fan base, which was minor. You exclude someone like Texas or Michigan.
Oh,
it's gonna be insane. And I
talk about civil war.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I expect them to expand this thing pretty fast, but that's the only uncertainty there. But I think it makes for a fascinating, time, and I think there's a lot of value, in each one of these conferences because of the schedule discrepancies and the fact that you could bet this from 3 angles now.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So the larger conference leads to just more gambling possibilities as far as looking at the schedule and trying to predict teams, that not just who's best. It's really about scheduling, a big part of it right now.
They didn't think it through, man. The model works on the old resume, like on the old system of 10 to 12 team conferences. The model where the 12 team playoff makes more sense with that. When you have an 18 team league, or 17 team like the ACC or something, I don't think you're looking for the best 2 teams. You're looking for the best schedule.
That's really interesting. All right. Can we talk a little bit about my new favorite conference, the Big 12, because I'm an ASU graduate. Who do we got in the Big 12? Who do you like in there?
This is the hardest conference to project, in my opinion. I think out of the entire, including the mid majors, you go through and I heard, Brett Yormark mentioned this at Big 12 Media Days, is that, and they've played the most close games for any conference, the most 1-score games over the past decade. And that was with Oklahoma and Texas, but now they leave and you bring in 4 teams that are pretty solid football programs. I think it's by far the hardest conference to project. There's no floor really. Like the floor is Cincinnati or Arizona State, but Arizona State's been very good. It's just they kind
Not
of had
for
a disaster.
while. They haven't. Yeah.
Well,
It's been a
they've
bit of
had
a
some winning
disaster.
seasons though.
No, they've had good seasons, but it's been a while.
They had the recruiting violations and stuff with Herm Edwards, but to me, they're still like, if Arizona State's your floor or Cincinnati's your floor. Cincinnati was in the playoffs just a couple years ago. Arizona State was a bowl team just 2-3 years ago.
The longest odds to win the Big 12 is actually BYU.
Yeah, and that's one I don't really understand because, I get it. They struggled last year, but they had quarterback problems. I actually think BYU is due for a. I wouldn't say that I have them in the Big 12 championship or anything, but I think they're gonna make a bowl. I like the over. You got to remember, the more we get away from the COVID season, BYU, I think, hit some struggles during the COVID years because you have 7-8 year players at universities because of the COVID eligibility thing, which is what BYU's advantage was forever. Every team has that now. So the more we get away from COVID, the more BYU I think will be able to flourish. But in general, this conference, so the Kansas Jayhawks have been my darling over the past couple of years. I thought it would be a great time for them to jump up. However, they are remodeling their home stadium. So they're playing at Arrowhead, which is where the Big 12 used to host their championship game, because it's kind of neutral for a lot of schools. Like when they play Iowa State, I expect that to be like a 50-50 crowd. That hurts my analysis of Kansas. So I think, I tend to agree with the odds of, like, if I had to place odds, Utah and Kansas State would be at the top, but I don't really like the value in them. And I think there's the gap between them and the bottom is very small. So to me, I look at a team like UCF with Gus Malzahn year 2. You look back a year ago, they had a 6-7 season. They made a bowl, but lost to Georgia Tech in the bowl game. They got better at the quarterback spot. KJ Jefferson is so much better than John Rice Plumlee for what Gus Malzahn likes to do. He goes out and gets Arkansas starting quarterback. I think they're one to watch. They're 10-1 to win the conference. And I was
just looking at that. They're 10-1 along with Iowa State and Arizona, all at 10-1 to win the conference.
Yeah, I think out of those three, UCF would be the one I trust most. Now, Iowa State's intriguing a little bit to me. Arizona, new head coach. I just think so much turnover. I tend to think, you stay away from that one. But
I feel like Arizona coaches leaving last season really hurt that program coming into the Big 12.
Yeah, and normally, when you have a first year coach and that many transfers these days, if a coach leaves, like half the team leaves. So I think that's just a little bit too much turnover for me for 1 year. And also the fact they are joining a new conference, different. Before, when you play the same teams over and over, what they like to do, their tendencies. I think it's harder. You've seen it historically with when Nebraska left the Big 12 for the Big 10, they've struggled. Colorado, when they left the Big 12 originally to the Pac-12, they really struggled. Arkansas, Miami, you can use this example for a bunch of different teams. But I think UCF, year 2 of Malzahn in the Big 12, that is. I really think you look back at last season, they almost knocked off Oklahoma. I just think their team is better. They've done some great things in the portal. Their NIL collective has been stepping it up. I think them to win the conference is very intriguing to me at 10-1. I also like the over 7.5 wins at, I think it's like -110 or 115. I think that one makes a lot of sense. And then another one that people are going to hate. I think Colorado's going to I think they're going to hit the over on their 5.5. I think they're getting disrespected with that number.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think about my team, Arizona State, 4.5 wins? Can they make it?
Look, it's year 2 of Dillingham, but that schedule is insane to me. Like they really have, when I just recently previewed them on our show and I was going through and I'm like, I know they're 7-point favorites to Wyoming week 1, which by the way, I like Wyoming in that, but I don't know how many other games they'll be favored. The most I could do is build a scenario where, BYU fires their coach or something. And by the time they play them in November, I think that's actually one of the best bets you can do is take the under 4.5 on Arizona State, just because I don't think there's like every game, they don't have an FCS. So every game is a tough game. They play at Texas State. home to Mississippi State in the non-con. I think under 4.5 is a smash spot for Arizona State.
Well, a lot of people are agreeing with you because the juice on the under 4.5 is at -150. So some heavy juice on the under there.
If you can shop around and find it at 4 with less juice, I think you're still good. I think you're still good because I just think that schedule's really challenging. And once again, like I think entering a new league where you don't know the styles of play, I think that makes it harder for new teams. Like I really believe there's an edge to playing the same coach every year, the same style that you're just accustomed to it. And now you have to go out into the wild and basically play all these teams that you don't really know what their tendencies are, philosophies are, stuff like that. I like the under on Arizona State. I like the over on Colorado at 5.5. I think Colorado is like a 7-8 win team, maybe even worth a sprinkle on that. On them to make the Big 12 championship or something. But just because I feel like there's going to be so much carnage in this league that you're looking for, I think there'll be a 3-loss team in the championship game. But UCF would be the one that I think is the best value that I trust the most.
All right, UCF in the Big 12. Let's jump over to the Big 10 then. We've got Ohio State at +155 to win, Oregon at +215, Penn State at +500, Michigan at +600. Where are you going with the Big 10?
I think this is hilarious because, for years the Big 10 you had 2 divisions and you thought, there's no way, like you'd end up with the worst Big 10 championship games. You'd end up with Ohio State and Iowa because the Big 10 West was so bad and Iowa would just wreck shop in the Big 10 West. Ironically, I've said this for years, once they get rid of the Big 10 West, we're never going to see a horrible matchup in the Big 10 championship again. Well, they finally got rid of the Big 10 West, and damn if I don't see that Iowa. You look at Iowa and what they return and their schedule, they return 18 starters. All right. They have 7 super seniors on this roster. I love Iowa over 7.5 wins. I think Iowa, with them getting Tim Lester at the offensive coordinator spot, is going to spice up that offense. When I say spice, I feel like me and you could spice up that offense, but because they've been so dull lately. But I really think the schedule, I only have them as a dog in 1 game. Now, knowing Iowa, they live and die by the sword so much. They play so many close games. There might be another loss there, but that is probably going to be good enough, once again, without knowing the tiebreakers, for them to make the Big 10 championship game. But here's the thing. They always get waxed in the Big 10 championship game because Iowa's an outdoor grinded out type of team. And they played in this in Lucas Oil against teams with a ton of speed, and they just can't match that. Well, that's why this bet is my favorite of the board. Iowa +700 to make the playoff, because if they play in the Big 10 championship game, they're making the playoff. And the best case scenario, if I was an Iowa fan, would be to lose out the tiebreaker. So go 10-2, lose out on the tiebreaker to Ohio State or Oregon or Michigan. So you don't have to play that extra game in the Big 10 championship and get waxed. Therefore, you host a playoff game because you're 10-2. They're not going to not put a 10-2 Big 10 team in, maybe a Big 12 or ACC. Mm-hmm. So I think +700 to make the playoff is like one of the best bets you could do with that roster.
Yeah. If you like Iowa that much to make the Big 10 championship, they are at 40-1 to win the Big 10. Would you place a bet on that and then hedge once they get into the championship?
It's worth a sprinkle, but my problem is the candidates that they would play. Ohio State and Oregon have so much damn speed, and them on that in that dome, I just don't think
they're going to be overwhelming favorites.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
The hedge is going to be harder. Yeah.
So like, I actually think that your safest bet is the +700, but you know what though, with the schedule discrepancies, I mean, maybe there's a chance. I mean, this is going to sound really crazy. I think you're going to lose all your listeners when I say this, but when when like Rutgers has a super easy schedule. I know it sounds ridiculous to say, well, Rutgers could make the Big Ten championship game, but I'm saying you never know carnage. If USC plays Michigan, USC plays they Penn State, Ohio State plays Michigan, Ohio State plays Oregon. If you get enough carnage, Rutgers could be in that mix somehow, and also USC could be in that mix. If it's USC and Iowa in the championship game, I actually think Iowa's got a puncher's chance with the way that they could run the ball and play defense. And like I said, you look at Rutgers' schedule, and I'm on the over with Rutgers just because I think they have one of the easiest schedules in all of college football. I know it's a big time jump. I know you're saying this guy's got to be drunk, right? Because their offense has been so bad, right? But I'm just saying, like, you look at the schedule, and it's hard to find games where they're 100% gonna lose. So all it takes, they had a winning season last season, right? All it takes is them winning these games, against kind of mediocre competition. I think the only flat out loss is at USC. The rest, I think, are all winnable games. So if they go on a run, they could play themselves into the mix with these crazy tiebreakers. And maybe, if you took the future on Iowa, you're hoping for USC, you're hoping for Rutgers. I tend to think you just take the plus 700 because I feel like Oregon, Michigan, or Ohio State will be in that game.
Yeah, no, that's good. Anything else with the Big Ten, or should we move on to the ACC?
Yeah, I think we can move on to the ACC. Those are my Iowa's my favorite play in the Big Ten, I would say. I think that's the one that just makes
Iowa is your favorite play in the Big Ten. And just a quick recap, you like LSU and Texas A&M in the SEC, and you really like UCF in the Big 12.
Correct.
I got those right?
And I like I like the under on Arizona State too.
You like the under in Arizona State too.
Sorry, buddy. I didn't
shop around and find see if you could find less juice in minus 150 though.
Fair.
All right, we've got the ACC, Florida State at plus 290 to win the division. We've got the conference, Clemson at plus 350, Miami plus 400, Louisville plus 650, and NC State, your brother's team, right? Is that your brother's team, NC State?
Well, no, he's Duke, but he kind of roots for NC State too. He's anyone but North Carolina. That's what he says.
I know. I've seen him put out some pro NC State stuff on social media. What do we got for the ACC?
This is one where I feel like it's similar to the Big 12, but I actually think they have more teams in the Big 12. So once again, I think your value is better here. First off, you have Florida State, who's reloading. I don't think they'll be nearly as good as a season ago. Could they still win the conference? Sure. Mm-hmm. But they lost a lot of players to the NFL. And then you have Clemson, who just refuses to use the transfer portal. Besides Air Force, Army, and Navy, who can't use the transfer portal, Clemson's the only other team in the nation that doesn't use it. Mm-hmm. And I honestly think it's been their shortcomings. Like over the past couple of years, the reason why Clemson hasn't been Clemson is you look at their wideouts and you say, they could have really used the transfer portal to make their team better. And that's the benefit of the portal these days is your teams that have a clear weakness. You could say, hey, let me go out and get a defensive tackle or a wideout or whatever.
And a team with such high profile as Clemson, you think they would clean up in the transfer portal.
Yeah. Well, it's Dabo Sweeney, who's like the mayor of that town now because he won some natties there. But, and look, a part of me respects it because he like wants to build within, but I also think part of it is moronic in a way. Cause it's like, wait, you have this thing that it's legal. You know what I mean? Like, why not go improve your team? And to be honest, like, I think that's going to hurt them again this year. Like, as much as I think they're a solid football team, they're a good football team. Their schedule, I think, is a little too challenging. And then there's the hype around Miami. Miami, went out and spent the most, them and Ohio State, I would say, and maybe Oregon, spent the most and brought in the most talent. And they've done this for a few years now. They have a mega booster named John Ruiz who just spends the hell out of his money bringing in players. It hasn't worked yet, though. And I don't know that it will work yet. You look at the roster and you say they should win the ACC. In my opinion, like you break down the roster, They have the best roster, but they have the coach I
best
trust
roster on paper. Yeah.
On paper to me, they have the best roster in the ACC, but I don't trust it. I don't trust their coach, Mario Cristobal. And also I think if you look at the schedule, this is a fun exercise too, is like, I think you search for the value again. There's like, I'm high. I'm going to trust Louisville as a team. I think Jeff Brom is just a fantastic coach.
Okay.
I was on them a season ago I took a preseason for them to win the ACC championship. They made it to the championship in his first year. And that was a shocking season, but guess what that was about? That was about the easiest schedule. Now this year's schedule is a little harder, but you look at Louisville's schedule. First off, it's year 2. I think this team will be better. Like they'll be a better football team. It might not have as many wins, but they'll be a better football team than a year ago. You look at the schedule and it's like they're at Notre Dame, they're at Clemson and at Kentucky. But guess what? Notre Dame and Kentucky are irrelevant for them making the ACC championship game. Those games are not conference games. So if they lose at Clemson, which I think is a game they actually could win, but obviously Clemson will be favored. You look at the other games, you're like, okay, in conference, home to Georgia Tech, home to SMU, at a bad Virginia team, home to Miami, who they beat last season in Miami, at Boston College, at Stanford, home to Pitt. And you're like, first off, out of all those I just named, Miami was the only team with a winning record. Miami and Georgia Tech, they beat them both teams last year. So I like taking a future on Louisville to win the ACC again.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's at plus 650.
Yeah. When I say again, meaning I took the future last year. They didn't win the ACC last year. They got to the championship and lost to Florida State. But part of I really think out of all the conferences we mentioned, this has the biggest chance to be 2 teams that are not the best. Like the best 2 teams will probably be Clemson and Florida State, like actual football teams. But their schedules, I think, are harder than say Syracuse or Virginia Tech or NC State or Louisville or North Carolina. I think this is the one where you're going to get a little bit of chaos, because I think you're going to have 2 teams that are probably not the best 2 teams in the conference playing each other in the championship game with an auto bid to the playoff on the line because of the schedule discrepancies. Wow. So I think Louisville's the play. I think another intriguing play is the likes, and this is more of a win total play, but it is, if you really want to get crazy and just take a stab on Syracuse. I think Syracuse has an unbelievable schedule. Like what
their win total set at 7, it looks like.
But their schedule, like you look at the schedule, and they have a brand new coach who's never coached a game in his life. His name is Fran Brown, but he was on Georgia's staff, and he brought in the starting quarterback from Ohio State who went 11-1 last season, Kyle McCord. He brought in like 4 or 5 Georgia transfers, a couple Alabama transfers, an LSU transfer, Texas A&M transfer. So he's brought in a bunch of talent. You look at the schedule and it's like, I don't know what game I'd like. At NC State, there'll be a dog. You look at the rest of the schedule, you say, I don't know, maybe Miami to end the season, but they play no one really that good, which is to me scary. If you're a fan of Clemson or Florida State or Miami, and they play Miami the final game of the season. So could you imagine how hyped Syracuse would be if they knew that if they win that game, they're in the ACC championship? I love the over. Huge. I think they have a better roster than people think, because people think just Syracuse, the past
basketball
decade.
School. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. Bringing in all those guys from Georgia and stuff. So I like the over on the Qs win total wise. And I actually think they have a legit shot to make the ACC championship game, which sounds insane. They've never done that. So shop to you drop customers.
Love it. All right. Wow. We're getting some good. So ACC, you're liking Syracuse to go over 7 wins, and you like Louisville to win the ACC.
Yeah, I just think there's a great chance that they're not playing Clemson and Florida State, and maybe even Miami. And even if they're playing Miami, I think Jeff Brom is so much of a better head coach than Mario Cristobal from an X's and O standpoint. It puts him in a great spot to win that. So those two are two of the better plays. I will also say, look at the schedules. Like I said, the 17-team conference, I think Virginia Tech, North Carolina, and NC State all have very favorable schedules. That's why I really believe this conference, like I said, 5 teams I just threw out there: Syracuse, Louisville, which I'm going to play on this, show. But the other 3 that I just said, North Carolina, NC State, and Virginia Tech, all 5 of those schedules to me are super, super favorable, which has me believing that they won't have Clemson and Florida State and Miami in the actual ACC championship game.
Wow. That's quite the prediction. That would definitely be chaos. If you're predicting chaos, that would definitely be chaos.
Well, my logic is those teams have to play each other. Like Florida State's playing Miami, Clemson's playing Florida State. So like someone's got to win and lose those games. Now, theoretically, could one team win all those games and be in the ACC championship? Sure. But like when you look at Virginia Tech's schedule, when you look at Syracuse's schedule, when you look at NC State's schedule, you're like, I don't really see many teams that could beat them, like there's not that much meat on the bone. So it's going to be fascinating. Like I said, I don't think they thought these things out. So like you might have a situation where we don't think the ACC or Big 12 is going to get 2 teams into the playoffs, but they might have to be, because if Clemson's sitting there at 10-2 or Florida State sitting there at 10-2, but they don't have the tiebreaker, or maybe there is no tiebreaker. Maybe Louisville just lost 1 game. Maybe Virginia Tech just lost 1 game in conference. So they're sitting on the sidelines watching, even though we know they're a better team than Virginia Tech, and that you might have to put them in the playoffs. So it makes for a fascinating postseason, man.
Yeah. Well, any listeners of the college football experience know that you don't just talk about the big teams. You don't just talk about the power conferences. You also dig deep into the group of 5 teams. What do you got for group of 5 bets? What's some true degen bets you've got out there?
Oh, you're speaking as a guy that went to, ECU. I like their value in the AAC, but that is a homer pick, so take that with a grain of salt.
All right.
But they're 18-1 to win the conference, by the way. Just throw that out there. All right.
All right.
But one that I love,
is it the Pirates?
ECU Pirates. Let's go.
All right. Yeah, let's go.
Just 2 wins last year, but a lot of close losses. And I think they went out in the portal and really got some big time names. And I also think the AAC is so different with the way that UCF is now in the Big 12, Houston's in the Big 12, SMU's in the ACC, Cincinnati's in the Big 12. Losing those teams, I think it's much more wide open. Then you add in Tulane's got a new head coach. I kind of think Memphis underachieves, and I think there's just a spot for potentially a team like ECU or FAU, but ECU plus 1800. I'm going to throw it out there. Another one, another few that I like. I was just at Mountain West Media Days, and I had the preseason polls came out while we were there. We voted, and at the time it was Boise State 1, Fresno State. Oh no, UNLV 2, Fresno State 3. After that news, which I am pretty adamant that UNLV does not deserve to be 2. That Fresno, I had it Fresno 1, Boise 2, and then I didn't even have UNLV 3. But Fresno's coach stepped down this past Monday, and he's a very good coach, Jeff Tedford, and that has me a little more weary of Fresno, right? So Boise's starting a freshman quarterback. We know Boise's Boise, but he's a 5-star. Malachi Nelson, who transferred from USC, is a redshirt freshman. And I'd never seen the guy play in college football. So I'm a little more weary on Boise than years past because we haven't seen this guy ever play. And he might be amazing. And I might just, hey, it's Boise. They always have a good program. But I think right now, because of all the coaching turnover within this conference, where I think you already had like 5 or 6 new head coaches, but now you add on Jeff Tedford at Fresno retiring because of medical conditions, and Utah State just had like some type of scandal where their coach got booted. Yeah, all in the past 30 days. So now you have so many coaching so much coaching turnover. I think Wyoming is a team we should really seriously think about here. Plus 700 or no, plus 1400. So 14-1 to win the conference. And the Mountain West is one of these ones where they play the home game on the 1 seeds. The championship game is on the 1 seeds turf. Mm-hmm. So Boise has to play at Wyoming this year. Wyoming doesn't play Fresno. They don't play UNLV. They return their entire offensive line. They have a quarterback that's being compared to Josh Allen. I kind of think the Wyoming Cowboys are one. Like if you had asked me a week ago, I was very bullish on the Wyoming over, but I thought Fresno was the best team in the conference. I love what Fresno was returning, but like I said, their coach retired on Monday, and he's a legendary coach. So you're just like, ooh, I don't know now. Maybe Fresno still does it because they have a talented roster, but I think if you're a Wyoming fan, you're looking around saying, hey, we already had a favorable schedule. Our strongest competition in this league is Boise, Fresno, and I guess the media says UNLV. UNLV is not on the schedule. Fresno's not on the schedule. Boise's on the schedule, but they're going to come to our house, which is the highest elevation in the nation, and they got to come in November with a freshman quarterback. I think Wyoming's a wise play here to win the conference.
Plus 1400. That's pretty good. Like that a lot.
I also like the win total there too.
Okay. What's the win total at?
Both are wise plays. I believe. Let me double check and see what it's at right now. But I believe it was. I think it was 6.5 when I was there.
6.5. Yeah, 6.5, yeah. And it's at plus 100 at least on DraftKings.
I think I just mentioned. I know they're taking on your boys, and I'm sorry. Week 1, they're playing Arizona State.
Yeah.
I think that's a juicy money line play right there. Is Wyoming to upset your Sun Devils. I'm sorry to come on your very show and say that, but
it's all right. That's all right. I don't have a lot of hope for Arizona State this season, so I'm gonna be okay. I'll be watching every game, but I'm not that hopeful.
Can I throw out one more that I like in the group of 5 that's worth a stab?
Please throw out a couple more if you want.
Texas State in the Sun Belt plus 500. Okay. To win the Sun Belt. I think Texas, and you know what? I should have, I apologize. I did not actually, they probably don't have those odds out yet. They said they're going to, I've heard by the end of July, have every single team's odds to make the 12-team playoff. And I'm anxiously waiting that. So Texas State is a team that surprised a season ago. They had never been good since jumping to the FBS. Last season, they hired GJ Kinney as a head coach, and they have a great season by their standards, like the best they've had in some time. And if you look at what they got going, that was just year 1. And you sit there and say, okay, they won that many games in year 1 where he just, up and just started coaching the team. 8-5, they beat Baylor. All right. At Baylor by 9 points. But here's another thing is you look at their losses with the exception to the Arkansas State game where the wheels fell off. They lost by 8 to Coastal Carolina. They lost by 4 to Louisiana. They lost by 7 to UTSA. Like they were pretty darn close to being an 11-win team.
Right in there. Yeah. Okay.
Well, that was year 1 of the coach too. GJ Kinney. Year 2, the team's going to be better. I think they've done better in the portal. And when you look at the schedule, and I got to highlight that the better teams in the Sun Belt, all their coaches left for the most part. Not Appalachian State, but Appalachian State's not on their schedule. Mm-hmm. James Madison's coach is gone. Troy's coach is gone. South Alabama's coach is gone. Coastal Carolina, who's a decent team, they lost their star quarterback to NC State. It seems like a down year for the Sun Belt, but when I look at Texas State and when I look at their schedule, I actually don't see like this is a team that I actually think like could be a surprise to make the playoff even. They host your Arizona State Sun Devils on a weeknight. They've never had a P5 really come in the San Marcos. I think they did once, but not when they were good. That place is they're going to tear down the goalpost. They win that game. And then you look at, you look at the schedule and I'm like, I don't see any game where they should be a dog in conference. you could say at Troy, but they get at Troy the first conference game. Troy's been good, but they're breaking in a brand new head coach. That's when you want to get them. You want to get them in October.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to win the Sun Belt. And I think is, and I also think if you could find this, which I said is not going to be out yet, I don't think it's that crazy to sprinkle a long shot on whatever the odds they release for them to make the playoff, because there is a legit shot that they could go 12-0. They just don't play any good teams. And to me, you saw Liberty last year. Had there been a 12-team playoff last year, Liberty would have been in because their schedule was light and they went undefeated. So watch out for the Bobcats of Texas State.
Yeah, you got to love that chaos with this 12-team playoff with teams like Texas State having a legit chance to get in.
Dude, I this is why I feel like the sport is about to get, like, from an overall perspective of the sport, college football has done everything in their way to hurt college football in my lifetime, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at, this is why it's been so exciting previewing the teams this year, is I really believe I wrote down 65 teams that I think have a legit chance to make the playoffs. And and you know, some of the old college football people think the regular season is dumbed down by a 12-team playoff. I couldn't disagree more, because when 65 teams have a chance now, each week it becomes must-watch TV. Before, you would never tune into you'd watch a Tulane Memphis game for gambling reasons, but you knew they didn't have a chance. Now you want to watch it because you're like, wait, the winner of this is going to have the inside track to make the playoffs. I think this 12-team playoff is going to really give the sport steroids in a way. I think between that and the video game that has been gone for a long time, I think, you know, college football is about to go through the roof as far as TV ratings, as far as fan interest. And did
you see that Patrick Mahomes brought a TV to Chiefs training camp for the first time so he could play college football 25?
I saw that, man. And that's look, people like me that grew up with that game. And this is funny. I was at Mountain West Media Day and I was eating lunch with some other people that cover college football. And I never thought about this. And I guess maybe because I've been so busy in life, I haven't had a recent system, and I haven't played video games lately. And I was asked, and someone said, "Hey, what do you think the sport? You know, will fans be more interested in college football because they haven't had the game in 10 years? So they've been alienating that fan base. And you know, do you think that college football will start to have more fans because of this?" And I go, "Well, yeah, because that's how I got into it. When I think about college football when I was a kid, a big influence was the video game." And
yeah, because as a kid, you start to root for players, not just teams, right? So when you start to learn the players' names and really get into them, that bonds you to the sport more.
It helped me with the NFL, Tecmo Bowl, and stuff like that. Like, all of that helped me grow my fan interest. So it's crazy to think that college football has been still such a successful enterprise without a video game in over a decade. So I think that's going to be fascinating. And I think this 12-team playoff is so good and healthy for the sport.
Awesome. Well, Colby, thank you so much for joining me on the Ourlads Gambling Show. Tell people where they can find you and where they can find the college football experience.
I'm on Twitter at @TheColbyD. The College Football Experience is on Twitter at TCE on SGPN. Also, highly recommend watching the show. I do graphics and everything for our stuff. So youtube.com/the College Experience. I really appreciate you letting me come on and just spew college talk for a long time here, man. It always a pleasure.
I find it really interesting. So thank you so much for, you know, I'm getting caught up. I've been so deep in all my NFL research. I'm now getting caught up on college football. So I'm really excited for the season. And so,
heck yeah, man. And
thank you for giving us all these great bets.
Yeah. Well, anytime. I'd love to come on the show whenever, and appreciate you as always, man. And looking forward to the next time we meet up.
All right. Awesome. He is Colby Dant. Make sure to subscribe to the Ourlads football channel on YouTube. Check out ourlads.com for all the latest depth charts, college and NFL. Thank you so much, and we'll be back next week.